In 1804, Serbs began a war for independence. Led by brilliant commanders, they won victory after victory, beating odds of 4-1, using everything from guerrilla warfare to frontal warfare, adapting to events in the most unstable time for Europe and turning it into a major regional conflict and the eventual collapse of the Ottoman Sultanate. At the beginning of 1807, the Ottoman Sultanate found itself at war with the Russian Empire. They demand that Serbs send 20,000 soldiers against Russia and pay tribute for the war. The Serbs, however, have a different plan. The previous year, during the assembly in Smederevo, they declared themselves independent, and now they have reached out to Russia for joint cooperation. Russia will be the major help for Serbian cause in the following years and events. They will also send to Serbia Konstantin Rodofinkin, their diplomat who will help shape the first constitution and become the leader of Karađorđe's opposition. On the 3rd of April, in the Austrian-controlled Srem region, which is inhabited by Serbs, another rebellion began. Led by Teodor Tican and inspired by the uprising down south, they rallied 15,000 rebels and took 45 villages. They demanded that feudalism be removed from Srem, since Serbian peasants were exhausted from supplying Austrian wars with Napoleon. However, unsupported by the already established Serbia, which did not want to fight on two fronts, Tican was ambushed and routed at the village of Bingova by Austrian soldiers. In an instant, all rebels flee their positions and go home. Tican was swiftly executed, while most other participants were formally pardoned. Although a short-lived rebellion, surviving only about a week, it sparked a sense of Serbian identity outside the Sandžak of Smederevo, and most importantly, it solidified Austrian policy towards Serbia, deciding not to support out of fear of rebellions in its own fragile empire. The Serbian rebellion in the Ottoman Sultanate was still going on. They finished off remaining garrisons led by Skopjak during the previous offensive to free up more troops for a campaign east. Šabac surrendered on the 6th of February 1807 and handed over the keys to the city, while Loznica fell with minimal resistance. Then, they prepared for an offensive into southeast Serbia, with the goal of securing towns there and combining with the Russian forces across the Danube. And so, in the summer of 1807, Hajduk Veljko Petrović beat an Ottoman force at Vrbovac, clearing the path for the rest of the offensive. Milenko Stojković surrounds and captures an Ottoman force at Podgorac. After this, he pushed towards Zaječar and Gurgusovac, modern-day Knjaževac. However, after multiple assaults, he failed to take these towns and retreated to await reinforcements. Mula Pasha, the vizier of Vidin, aided by Alija Gušanac, prepared his army to attack Stojković, who was now entrenched at Štubik. There, Mula Pasha entrenched his army as well to face the Serbian fortifications. He surrounded his force on all sides, preparing for a long-term siege, and used a great amount of artillery to weaken Serbian positions and lower their morale. He tried many times to attack the Serbian position, which was met with stiff resistance from Serbian side and repulsed. However, soon, 5,000 reinforcements under Karađorđe joined fighting from the west. His force spread out both flanks of the original army. North, they successfully took position with the minimal opposition, while south, they were initially repulsed, but eventually succeeded in taking Ottoman positions. After this, a standoff continued, so Milenko Stojković, now free from the encirclement, went south to help the Russian army in taking the strategic fortress island of Ada Kale. Once they had done so, the Russian general Isaev crossed the Danube into Serbian territory with 600 infantry and 200 cavalry. They went straight to Štubik, where the standoff was still happening. Serbs launched a frontal attack on the 1st of July, aided by Russian cavalry in the north. Ottoman soldiers tried to hold their ground, but in the brutal hand-to-hand combat, Serbs and Russians had the upper hand. Attacked from multiple directions, Ottoman soldiers were engulfed in fear and panic, and soon, Mula Pasha's army began a disorganized retreat. After the battles, Serbs successfully took surrounding cities and achieved all their goals. Furthermore, they signed an official alliance with the Russian Empire. Serbian losses are around 200, with 130 Russian losses as well. Ottoman soldiers, on the other hand, had around 1,500 due to their repeated assaults on Serbian positions, which were repulsed with heavy casualties. Furthermore, Russians, Serbs, and Ottomans signed a ceasefire that was to last from 1807 until April of 1808. After the ceasefire ended, Serbs prepared for a campaign west. A Russian newspaper, as well as the London Times, claimed the Serbs will attack Sarajevo. Despite some rebel detachments making incursions into Bosnia, they failed to take any major strongholds. But now, the Serbian armies prepared 12,000 infantry and 6,000 cavalry along the Drina River with headquarters in Užice, and made many earth fortifications. The Russians also sent engineering majors to inspect the fortifications. On the contrary, Austria prohibited exports of lead, which forced the rebels to manufacture it themselves. Fearing this invasion into Bosnia and spread of Christian rebellion in the Balkans, the Ottoman Sultan ordered all 37 regions in Bosnia to prepare 1,000 soldiers each and confiscate all weapons Bosnian Christians had. Despite the escalations, smaller groups still continued to raid on both sides. Ottoman contingents operated around the town of Soko. They raided surrounding villages but were often ambushed and forced to retreat. Petar Moler, the leader or voivoda of Soko region, raised an army to attack this Ottoman garrison, but they managed to counterattack him for the fortress. Angered by this, he and his 5,000-man army crossed the Drina. He looted and burned down villages around the fortress and town of Srebrenica. A Bosniak army, 14,000 strong, under Hasan Pasha gathered nearby, but Moler soon got strong reinforcements and defeated the Bosniak army. Hasan Pasha then crossed the Drina and defeated 2 Serbian trenches there. Emboldened by these victories, he pressed forward. He attacked Krsta Ignjatović, who entrenched himself on the highest peak of the Soko mountains. They fought fiercely. However, the Ottomans were unable to take the trench and were dangerously running out of time, since the Serbs could get reinforcements at any moment. Ante Bogicević arrived on the battlefield with his men to help the Serbian entrenchment, but fighting did not pause. Janissaries continued to attack the position for 3 days straight, with no end in sight. However, on the final day of the battle, to the shock of the Ottoman army, they heard sharp fighting to their rear. Suddenly, Moler's army appeared on the battlefield, encircling the entire Ottoman army, which began to panic and run wherever it could. After the battle, the Ottoman army was pursued across into Bosnian territory with huge losses. Another attempt was made on the 4th of October 1808, when another army 15,000 strong crossed into Serbian land. They camped at Rajevo. Ante Bogicević informed Karađorđe of this, and they raised a combined army of 16,000. They attacked the Bosniak army and defeated it after 2 days of fighting. Hasan Pasha attacked immediately after. He narrowly killed Karađorđe when he clashed with Karađorđe's personal guard, but he was saved when Ante Bogicević arrived with a couple thousand troops, which pushed the Ottoman army back. After these battles, no attempt was made by the Serbian side to take Sarajevo, and the Serbs managed to stabilize the front for now. In Austria, another short-lived rebellion took place, this time in the Banat region of Vojvodina. The rebel leaders called people to join the rebellion, and also used a false letter supposedly written by Karađorđe. The rebellion started with a church bell ringing, after which the priest, escorted by the people, started riding towards the place where Karađorđe supposedly was to meet them. However, instead of meeting with Karađorđe, the rebels met a squad of Austrian troops, which immediately escorted them to the prison. Nevertheless, the Serbs used the rest of the year for military reforms. They added mandatory conscription and organized a standing professional army. In Belgrade, a permanent battalion garrison was formed, while in each other region, called the Nahia, 2 companies were organized. Serbs also made their first military rule book, modeled after the Russian army. During this time, Dositej Obradović, the most educated man in Serbia, became the first minister of education and opened the first university in Belgrade, called Velika Škola. He spoke more than 8 languages and paved the way for further reforms on the Serbian language. Industry also began to flourish during this time. Cannons were made in Belgrade, while gunpowder was made in Valjevo, Kragujevac, and in a monastery called Manasija in Despotovac, while in Jagodina there was a factory for sabers. Mines also began working again, most importantly in Rudnik and the surrounding region, as well as at Krupanj. However, they were frequently raided and stopped working because of local skirmishes. Furthermore, there was a permanent training center with reserves at Topola, where fresh recruits were trained by previous Austrian officers, Serbian veterans, and Russian instructors. Serbian ambitions seem to be endless, and the option of an invasion into Bosnia is still not impossible. An offensive southeast with the Russians to take Niš, or an offensive southwest to join forces with Montenegro, cutting Bosnia off entirely. However, instead, they are about to face something completely opposite that they didn't expect. It will show them just how fast everything can change.